In this episode, we are going to be reviewing The Graduate from 1967. This was directed by Mike Nichols and it starred Dustin Hoffman and Bancroft and Katherine Ross. Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies. This is a YouTube video podcast where we explore movies from all over the world and talk about how those stories were told on film. I want to welcome back Bailee Walsh, who is a film enthusiast and YouTuber herself. She's got a great channel dedicated to Criterion Channel, book reviews, film reviews, amongst much more. Bailee, welcome back. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me again. And I'm a little nervous, but I'm excited to talk about one of my favorite movies.
Yeah, it's such an iconic film, and I've seen it so many times, and every time I see it I always pick up on something that I hadn't seen before. And I was curious, when did you first see it, and has your feelings changed at all about it with repeat viewings?
I have seen this movie so many times, actually, like I've lost track. So my whole like history with it, I guess, is that I first saw it, I think like a couple years after I graduated high school, but I hadn't yet started university courses yet. So it like really resonated with like, what am I doing with my life?
Yeah, yeah.
And and I loved it the first time, and I feel like it was an immediate favorite. And then later on, when I did start courses, I had a film class that the final project we had to like choose a movie from like 10 that were listed or something like that. And we basically had to like analyze the film. And I chose The Graduate. And because of that paper, I just kept rewatching the movie. So I have the Criterion edition
Oh,
here,
perfect. I have
which
it too.
has two audio commentary tracks. But I also have this steelbook. This is from Studio Canal. This has a different audio commentary track, and like none of the special features overlap. So
Oh,
there was so much to work with in terms of like writing this paper and things like that. And I just kept rewatching the movie. So I've lost track of how many times I've seen it. And I think that with doing that paper, it only increased my appreciation and like respect for the movie. I find the movie hilarious,
it's so
probably
funny.
hilarious even upon like every rewatch. It's just like
Yeah.
it's like an uncomfortable hilariousness.
Yeah, it's so wacky. I mean, I always found it funny, but watching it again, I realize how bold it is in a lot of ways. this guy this guy has an affair with his parents' friend who's twice his age, and then phosphorus her daughter. And
You know?
it's so in like that alone is so insane. And even one thing that struck me about Benjamin is that he, not just the situation, but the way in which he goes about everything is so wacky. Like Dustin Hoffman's performance is so good. I mean, you can feel
Mhm.
his anxiety in the
Yeah.
early part of the film so much. I mean, everything, the looks on his faces, from the when he's on the plane at the beginning to when he's in his bedroom in front of the fish tank talking to his father, to meeting Anne Bancroft in the hotel, or talking to the clerk working at the hotel, and just the anxiety. But then later on, as he's pursuing Elaine, he's so confident in every single decision he's making,
Mhm.
but acting like insane. Like, particularly when he tells his parents we're going to get married and they're all happy. And then he's like, well, he's like, well, actually, she
Yeah.
doesn't like me.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
but he just decided it's going to happen.
Mhm.
And I don't know why that never occurred to me. Like, just everything. I don't know why it never occurred to me how like nutty he is. Like, waiting outside of her classroom. And then I love the way they edited it. Like, it's just like
Yeah, me too.
a quick cut, and then the class ends. Like, he literally stood in front of the door for like 3 hours, asking the same question about whether they were going to get married or not. Or I don't know. Like, wow, it's so insane. I don't know if those elements of his character popped out to you. I'm sure they did.
Yeah. I mean, Dustin Hoffman just like invokes the character so well.
Yeah.
And I mean, watching, because I rewatched the movie, I rewatched it again with like one of the audio commentaries, and I watched a handful of the supplements, mostly just on the Criterion release.
Yeah.
And the way that like Mike Nichols was talking about how like that little like whimper thing that he does, and like
Yeah.
the way that Dustin Hoffman would like suppress his voice in a way to get that nervousness to be in his voice. It's
Yeah.
just like really interesting because I it was making me think of like as if on set he just like flipped a switch in a way and started speaking a little differently and started getting that nervousness,
Yeah.
but
No, that
it comes out so well. And I mean, that's part of the hilarity of it. That's just like his nervousness. And then sometimes he says something and he's like so confident in it. I mean, literally the line, it's on the back of the back of the steel case says
oh
the
yeah.
infamous line.
Oh
I
yes.
mean, he says that so confidently, and then
Yeah.
she just kind of laughs it off, even though she's in complete control of the situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And and then you see the sense of just, absolute shame that he may have got that wrong when he's like,
Mhm.
aren't you? And she's like, no, I
Yeah.
hadn't thought of it, even though of course she was. Yeah, yeah. I want to get more into the performances for sure, but I'm curious, because it is this, wacky film on the one hand, like almost screwball comedy in a sense.
Mhm.
But what do you think it's truly about? I mean, what do you take from it?
I think that it's mostly about just like this transitional period in your life. I just think it's about like this transitional time of emerging into like real life, into the adult world, but also like having autonomy over your own life, and
Right.
especially because like all this time it's just like his parents making decisions for him, and even like with getting with Elaine, it's their insistence on like,
Yeah.
why haven't you called Elaine yet?
Right.
We The parents are like trying to get them together, um and almost like they're literally almost trying to like do an arranged marriage, just with the way that Mr. Robinson and then Benjamin's parents are like insisting on this. And it's like it's also this difference between the difference between the generations, but also the older generation kind of initiating the younger generation into their society and into their
Yeah.
world, which Benjamin is just trying to be against, and not be like his parents, not be in this society, which is obviously how you get the main premise of him having this affair with Mrs. Robinson.
Right.
So like I think when people hear about the premise of The Graduate, they know that part of it, but like really it's not about that, in
No.
my opinion at least. But you also can't have the movie without it. You can't have the story without that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree, because it's you're right. It's much more about the fact that he is rebelling against what his parents want for him, and how they're, as you said, like they're basically writing his life, and he's this
Mm,
guy who's like expecting to like hit a, X, Y, and Z in life, and you don't go away from that, and he doesn't even know what to do with himself. I mean, it's written all over his face, and he says to his
mhm.
father, well, I just thought my future would be different. And I love that, that one of the early scenes where the party that's going on with all his parents' friends, and
Mhm.
everyone's just like coming at him and pressuring him. And that Mr. McGuire's like, that one piece of advice, he says plastics
Yeah.
outside. And of course, it's almost symbol. I know on one of the featurettes, someone said, it's almost symbolic, like their generation, everything was like artificial, right? So it's like
Mhm.
go
Yeah.
into, wink, wink, go into plastics. And he doesn't know what to do, but he doesn't want to be a part of that world.
Yeah.
And
That's like the one thing he does know. And then that's why he becomes so attached to Elaine, because Elaine is like the first person he's met and like had an interest in. That even though it was like sort of forced upon him, the situation, he's like, oh no, I like her, and
Yeah.
this could go somewhere good. But
Yeah.
he latches onto her like a little too much.
Well, yeah, and of course before that, the whole affair with Mrs. Robinson is just, it's one act of rebellion. I mean, that's pretty. I mean, even like, in anyone's real life, that would be pretty, radical to have an affair with your parents' friend.
Yeah.
And she's
Well, and
twice.
their business partners too, like the
Yeah.
dads.
Yeah, I know. Like, he's known her since he was a kid. So
Mhm.
it's a total act of rebellion. And I think that she, or perhaps more he, well, it's hard to say. Perhaps they saw it in each other, but I think they both saw that they were both outsiders in a lot of way.
Mhm.
Like, if you notice her at the party, the camera
Yeah.
picks up on her at one point and she's all alone. No one's talking to her. She just
Mhm.
looks at Benjamin, and it just focuses on her for a second. And she was an alcoholic. She also got pregnant when she was young, so she felt that she had to get married. So you get this impression that she's never been happy, and so she's almost rebelling against this art, as they, the artificial way of living. And I think they that's how they connect, because I think they see that in each other, which is really interesting. But it's hard to tell whether there was any feelings amongst each other. I don't know how you felt. You got that long scene where he wants to talk to her before
That's
they
my
have
favorite scene,
sex, and
probably.
he's like, she just wants to get right to it. I don't know. What did you think? Did you think they had any real feelings for each other, or do you think it was just purely a fling and sexual fling and exciting, rebellious act?
I I think that it like could have been there had they tried, but Mrs. Robinson was just like ignoring that part of a
Yeah,
relationship.
yeah,
And then Benjamin was clearly more open to it, but still like there's no way anything would have been able to like come out of the relationship just because of the way that he expresses like his his nervousness and his like, oh my god, what would my parents think, what would they all think, like he's too concerned about that, I think, to let more than just like Elaine know, and he only really lets Elaine know because he wants to be the one to tell her as opposed to Mrs. Robinson.
right, right.
So like I definitely think there's like potential there. And honestly, I'm like a really big fan of like unconventional relationships, which is partially probably why this is one of my favorite
Yeah,
movies.
me too.
Regardless of like the ethics involved, like The Graduate's one of my favorite movies. Harold and Maude is one of my favorite movies, and that's like consensual and mutual. But
Yeah.
also like Lolita is one of my favorite books.
Ah,
And as much as that is like, oh, this is about a pedophile,
right.
it's still like so interesting. And so
Yeah.
just like different dynamics of those sort of unconventional relationships really interest me. And so I feel like with The Graduate, because there is at least a little bit something there, and they're both adults, um, and they understand the situation, I'm kind of like, but I kind of want to see where this goes, even though
Yeah.
he like that's not where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, there was no room for it, because for one thing, Mrs. Robinson really doesn't allow anything to happen. I mean, he wants to talk and she doesn't want to talk. I think perhaps she didn't think there was any kind of a possibility for any kind of real relationship because
Mhm.
of who he was, and that, he's half her age, and of course the families were partners, and she's married, of course. And so I think for her it was just, she felt so trapped. Of course, you find out in that scene that her and her husband aren't even intimate anymore. They sleep in separate rooms. So she's in this loveless marriage. So I think this was just like a drug for her. It was like an escape. And um she was attracted to him, and she wanted to do it. And he and of course he reciprocated. So it's really fascinating. But that was one thing, you really get a glimpse in that scene. And what's interesting is that I like how at the end Mike Nichols lets the camera roll a bit, because she's getting dressed because they get into this big argument, and he thinks that she said he wasn't good enough for Elaine. And so they get into this big fight, and he calls her a broken down alcoholic, and she's about to leave, and then he says, no, I want you to stay. And he says, I like you, I look forward to this. It's one of the most exciting things in my life right now. And then he leaves the camera rolling, and then she just starts to get undressed slowly again, and so does he. But you felt that he wasn't really over the fight, or she wasn't over it. They just they can't really communicate. They're both on opposite ends of the room. And I just felt it was sad. They make up, but they don't. I don't know if that was something that stood out to you.
Yeah. Well, I also think that that's sort of the turning point of the film, because I mean, that's the last time that you see them together in that way. The rest of the time, it's at the Robinsons' house pretty much. So that sort of, to me, signifies, okay, going into act 2 now, even though it's not structured like that.
Right. One thing that popped out to me about, and this is a testament to how good Anne Bancroft is in the part, was that, she was very cool, very detached, very sexy, but then scary at the same time. Every time she got mad at him, she was always like, whoa. Even earlier when he's trying to leave, and she's she's in her slip, and she says, bring me up my purse. And then she's like, for God's sakes, Benjamin, would you just bring the purse up here? And she was, or when he says he was going to take Elaine out as a joke when they were in bed later, and she pulls on his hair, don't you ever, take her out. Or later on, of course, when he does want to take her out, and she says, she really looks like she's going to kill him in that car. It was almost like she talked to him like a kid at times, just you do exactly what I say, like a tough, almost abusive mother, So I liked that was a part of their relationship. They did not seem like a couple at all. And it was almost like this, domineering type of woman, and very much, in control. Once Elaine gets in the picture, who of course played by, beautifully by Katherine Ross, I never really thought as much about her character, because Anne Bancroft and Dustin, they really kind of they really sort of stand out in the film. But she's also a really interesting character, because she goes on this date with Ben, and he's intentionally acting like an asshole, takes her to the strip club. That scene is so sad, especially when the strippers, whatever was
Right
attached to her breasts, bouncing on her head. And she runs out, and she, he calms her down, and they kiss, and then of course he falls madly in love with her, by the end of the date. But I couldn't help but wonder, why would she have easily have forgiven him that quickly on that first date? And then even later on, from her point of view, because as we saw in the film, her mother told her that, she was raped by Benjamin. And here he is, he's pursuing her. And he's not like the other guys that she's been with. You see that other guy that they met at the zoo, he's got the pipe, he's the all-American boy, and he's very, I get the impression he's just charming, he's a gentleman. And here's Ben, who's this obsessed guy running after a bus because he sees her on a bus. So I thought to myself, I wonder if, she must have found the fact that he was rebellious appealing. I think that he was unlike anyone she saw. And I think that was ultimately why, she runs off with him at the end. I don't know what you thought about Elaine.
Yeah, I agree. Because I'd say Elaine lacks a little bit in the film, but I think that's just because of how much it really focuses on Benjamin. The scene at the end where like obviously he's like banging on the window, and
Yeah.
then she looks up at him, but then she's like looking around her, and I think that's her like realization moment. Like she's like, no, this is our parents'
Yeah.
society and them, and I don't want to be like them either.
Yeah.
Let's Then she finally like takes this her leap of autonomy, her decision for herself, as opposed to everything that her parents have laid out for her. And then they
Exactly.
run
Yeah.
away.
Yeah, that's well said. That's exactly it. And, I mean, that's so the fact that there he is with a crucifix, swinging it at everyone and then locking them in the church. I
Mhm.
mean, that's just so classic of symbolic of like, shoving even their religion down their throat or just trapping them inside of their, inside of their world while they're, quote unquote, run off into the distance.
Mhm.
I love the fact that when they're on the bus, because I believe in the script, it just said that they both like laugh at the end on the
Mhm.
bus and whatever. It's like happily ever after. But I love that it's just that blank expression because it's like, yeah, now what? Like I believe it was either that Mike Nichols left the camera rolling and they were just kind of like, why is he not cutting? Or they just happened to respond that way. But it was so perfect because it just in the look on their faces, it summed up everything that they had experienced was not really about love or love for each other. It
Mhm.
was more about like a fuck you to the system, and it's like which is a very sick even now, but particularly in the 1960s, it was very
Yeah.
much people rebelling against the older generation, right? So I
Which
don't
is
know if
so
that's
interesting.
what you
Yeah,
thought.
well, it's so interesting because it's still, you say it's not like completely based on love, which is interesting to say because neither were like their
Yeah,
parents' marriages either, but it's still very similar in a way, even though they're trying to do something
yeah,
rebellious.
right.
But the one of the features, an interview with film writer and historian Bobby Osteen about editor Sam Osteen's work on The Graduate. She gives a story about that last scene of how Sam was on set and Mike Nichols sort of put him in charge of directing that scene. And so
Oh,
like in the feature it shows him like you know how it looks back at the people on the
yeah,
bus, and they're all like looking back at Ben and
yeah,
Elaine like
yeah.
what is
Why are
happening?
you in a wedding dress?
um, yeah, he's one of those people, and
Oh,
he was like acting as director, but because his role is not actually director, he forgot to yell cut. So then Dustin Hoffman and um Katherine Ross are still like kind of playing the scene, but then also like don't know what to
yeah,
do.
yeah. Because like,
And
why are
so
you still
it was
rolling the
just like
camera?
this happy accident
Oh, it's
of
perfect.
the guy forgetting to yell cut, and then when Mike Nichols saw it in the dailies, he was like, "Oh, okay, this is our ending."
Yeah.
But it's also interesting that he doesn't mention that in the audio commentary that he does. He attributes their looks to having like yelled at them on set because of like the situation with like the bus and shutting down the street or something like that in order to film. So it's interesting that there are these two
Oh,
stories that pertain to that scene, but they don't mention each other. I mean, granted, I don't know how much the widow and film historian like knew about other things that happened on set since she technically like, wasn't there. But it's interesting that Mike Nichols didn't even mention that at all
oh, it's
in the
interesting.
audio commentary. So it's they're not like necessarily contradicting each other, but they also don't align necessarily.
Well, yeah, I guess they had different interpretations of how that happened, or perhaps it was a combination of things, like
Yeah.
yelling on the one hand and then leaving the camera rolling on another, right? So it's just a happy accident because yeah, I don't, it's interesting to think that like this extra, I don't know what it is, 20 seconds of them on the bus, if that was
Yeah.
shortened and if it was just a pure happy accident, it would have drastically changed the film because yeah, the fact that they're kind of like neutral at the end and like now what says so much because yeah, like they don't really know each other. I mean, I don't doubt that he like totally fell for her, that he was, or that there was something between them. But
Yeah.
they're not like ready to be like married or anything. And then at the same time, they're 20, right? They're like, when at that age,
Yeah.
you do think you're so in love, within a couple of days. I mean, I'm not saying that people don't fall in love quickly, but it's a little more innocent and naive when you're 20. Not that it's not necessarily real, but it's just you're ready to like make those marriage plans. You feel like you could just do it. So I absolutely love that. Another thing about this film that is really beautiful is how he made it more stylized. Like a lot of the visuals, on the one hand, he's drawing attention to some of the techniques he's using, Mike Nichols, but it also speaks so much to the feelings of the characters and what was happening within the relationships. But he certainly was using like visual motifs, which felt like Hitchcock used visual motifs a lot. A lot of filmmakers do. The obvious one, of course, is like when he gets into that scuba diving
Yeah.
outfit,
Yeah.
and it's a POV shot of him like looking through the goggles that he's got on, and the family's kind of like treating him like a puppy. It's like, come on, like put on a show. And you even hear early in the film at the party, we're like, hey, let's look at Benjamin's photos, and so he's like
Yeah.
this little monkey for everyone.
But
And
it's just I like that line is just like played over.
yeah,
You don't actually see what's happening. You're just seeing the party. You don't actually see like his mom doing that or anything like that.
yeah, no, I love that too, because everything is just coming at this guy,
Mhm.
and of course putting him in the water and then pushing him back down. Of course, it's very symbolic of drowning him, right? And there he is, like boom, alone underwater, as the camera pulls out, and then right away it cuts to him calling Mrs. Robinson. And now he's going, because at first, as he was hesitant, and he ran away when she got naked in front of him. And then he makes that call. And then of course it's that montage. I mean, I always feel a couple of different ways. Sometimes montages are necessary, like when you have a real like epic story where it's perhaps like a 40 years or 50 years or whatever, like you may have to sum certain sequences of events up, and they could be done so beautifully. But my problem with montages sometimes is that they're kind of a shortcut to the emotion. They kind of distill the feelings like into like these 2 minutes of a sequence of events. But sometimes they're done so well, and they're so inventive and so cinematic that your jaw just drops. And that whole montage of him meeting Mrs. Robinson at the hotel, and then being at home, and Dustin even looks guilty as he looks at, like, opens the door and sees his parents, and he almost has this look of guilt on his face. Back to a close-up of him, zoom out, and there he is with her again. And then of course that classic cut where he's jumping on top of
Yeah,
whatever that thing is
the
in the
raft.
pool. Yeah, the raft, but then it's like onto, which is a very challenging to match that. They
Mhm.
matched it perfectly. And then he's on top of Mrs. Robinson, and of course his father, Ben, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And it's a POV through his sunglasses, right? Because they're all
Mhm.
kind of blurry. It's a lot of those kind of Hitchcock tropes, and it's just so great. And so on the one hand, it's like they draw attention, but they're so well done. And then you think, well, why not draw attention every now and then? I mean, it's not that it's somewhat intellectual, but it's also somewhat emotional and artistic. And I just love everything. And none of them are accidents, clearly. Like they're
Mhm.
well thought
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
It speaks volumes in terms of not only his emotional life, but Mrs. Robinson, because you hardly ever see her face. She's walking back and forth in the
Mhm.
hotel room. And again, it's very cool and very distant. And I think that's why you don't see her much, is because he really doesn't get to see her either. It's very cut to the
Yeah,
chase and bam, ma'am,
I
thank
think
you.
that I think that also with the just with the whole direction of the film, it's very much from like Benjamin's perspective, even if we're not actually getting his perspective through. I mean, there's so many things that are shown. The party scene is probably like the most noticeable thing, just because it is so like claustrophobic, and he's just wanting to
Yeah,
get out of there. And he's like, "Oh my God, there's so many people here, and they're crowding me, and they're like not even calling me my name, and because they're always like track star and like
yeah,
graduate. They're always like calling him something like not
yeah,
Benjamin."
yeah,
Which that plus like just like the scenes with his point of view, and with especially like with him looking out a window, or with the mask of the scuba outfit, um they're very much like him as an object being
yeah,
kind of stuck, and that is like further symbolized with the underwater scene,
yeah.
because it almost looks exactly like the little scuba guy in his fish tank in the beginning. Like it's so similar, and
Yeah,
just like from
yeah,
watching and listening to Mike Nichols, like
yeah.
how intentional all of that
Oh,
was.
totally. Yeah. Yeah. Like being trapped, right? Like he's
Mhm,
drowning and he's trapped in this glass house.
mhm.
Yeah, yeah. That's exactly what the fish tank symbolizes. Was there any the making of this film is fascinating because as I'm sure Dustin Hoffman was this actor from New York. He
Mhm.
was not a star. He had been in a couple of movies as with smaller parts, but mainly in theater.
Mhm.
And here he is after they saw like 100 actors, and he gets the part. In I think in the book he's more like Robert Redford looking. He's like
Mhm.
the blonde, and here's like Dustin, who's like this short, you know, brown
Jewish
haired
guy.
Jewish guy,
Yeah.
and he didn't think he was gonna get it at all. Like he
Mhm.
for one thing, he thought his screen test was really bad. And as an actor myself, we are always our own worst critics. And of course, those screen tests are on the Criteria channel. And I mean, his screen test is not brilliant or anything, but he brought a real sense of humor to it. Like he was sort of like cracking up at times. I don't know if that was out of like nervousness, which of course works for that character because he's so
Yeah.
nervous, particularly in the first half of the film, and he's cracking up and stuff. And even Katherine Ross is, and I wondered if that was why Mike Nichols was attracted to them, because everyone else's screen test was so dramatic. And
Mhm.
I can see why they would make those choices, because going into it, you don't necessarily know what the writer or the director has in mind. Um, and I can understand that because, yeah, like, here this poor woman who's likes this guy and finds out that he's had an affair with her mother. I mean, and she thinks that it was a rape and all this stuff. Uh, I could see why some of those actors would have like really been devastated or raw. And the screen tests are good, but then you see Dustin and Catherine are a little more like looser, and it worked so well because then of course in the film they found more of a happy medium between those two, because it feels very dramatic at the same time. Gene Hackman was supposed to
Mhm.
play well, he was cast to play Mr. Robinson, and then Mike Nichols fired him. And then they got I believe is Murray Hamilton. I always forget his name. He's in a ton of movies. I know on one of the documentaries, featurettes, Buck Henry and Lawrence Terman, to this, I believe they had even said they still don't get why Mike did that. Because Mike just felt he wasn't, something along the lines, he didn't feel Gene had a kind of middle class or upper
Yeah, that's what
classness
they said.
about him. And I can see what he means, but I don't know. Gene can kind of play both. I mean, this is before he was, became such a big star. But to be fired from a
Mhm.
major film is, that's like a death of any actors, but especially Mike Nichols, who at this time was like a top director. But he was fortunate, of course, because Warren Beatty cast him in Bonnie and
Yeah.
Clyde, and knew him from working with him on another film called Lilith. But I always find that interesting that Gene was in this. And then, I mean, Mike Nichols was not, he didn't care who you were. Like he even fired Robert De Niro in a movie that, I don't know if you know that story. he was gonna do a movie with him, and this was after De Niro was a star, and he fired him, and then the film wasn't made. It was turned into The
Oh,
Goodbye Girl with Richard Dreyfuss, but it was a very different script before that. Um,
oh,
but yeah, he just
huh.
didn't care. And I always found that really, really interesting. But there's so, if you ever get a chance, the other documentary on this is called The Graduate at 25. I saw
Mhm.
that a long time ago because that's from like the early 90s. That's on the other DVD of it as well. And Dustin tells the whole story of how he got cast and how he thought there's no way he was going to get cast because
Yeah.
and then it ended up making, because it was supposed to be Charles Grodin, but then he wanted more money because he was actually more well known, and he was like, "Well, I'm not gonna only take 17,000. It was like $17,000." But Dustin was like, "I'll take it," Of course.
Yeah.
So I can't recall if Charles Grodin regretted that or not, because his memoir is really, really good. He talks about it, but that was mainly why he turned it down, because he had been on Broadway at that point. He had been in television, he had been in
Mhm.
movies, and he just thought, why am I only getting $17,000?
But like
But
I can't picture anybody but Dustin Hoffman in
yeah, me
this
neither.
role.
Me neither. I mean, even some of the line, the way he said some of the lines, particularly are there's. I mean, they're also so funny. The hotel room, especially when he's with Mrs. Robinson, and then she said, he's hesitant at first, and she says, "Do you not find me attractive?" And he goes, "No, no, I find you the most attractive out of all my parents'
The
friends."
most. I love that line.
That's classic. Or in the phone booth when she says he's calling her to give her the porter's a little on to them, and she says, "Aren't you forgetting something?" And
Yeah.
then he goes, "I
Isn't
just
there
want to
something you
say,
want to tell me?
yeah, I just want to say I really appreciate this." It's like the room number mentioned. Oh my god, it's so brilliant.
But
The
I also
only
love that Mrs. Robinson just is like, well, this is Benjamin.
Yeah,
He's
I
just
mean,
being
she's
an
like,
ass, and she's just like okay with it.
yeah, yeah, I know, because I was thinking that too. I'm like, this is a turn off. But I think maybe I think she thought he was, maybe his innocence was part of his appeal, perhaps, because she
Mhm.
even says, "Is this your first time?" And that's what sort of gets his confidence to hit at his insecurity. And you see right
Mhm.
before he closes the door, you see the smile on her face, right? So it's like she
Yeah.
liked to toy with him or find
Well,
ways
yeah,
to get things out of
she
him.
knows exactly what she's saying in order to get him to do the things that she wants him to do.
I just wanted to lastly mention, of course, the score. It's like, Simon and Garfunkel. It's like the all-time best
Mhm.
score ever.
Yeah, I'd say the only thing though is they play like Scarborough Fair like one too many times.
Yeah, it is. It
You're
is
like,
a bit.
we get
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
They're going to Scarborough Fair. Um,
Oh, I love Simon and Garfunkel. I mean, I can
yeah.
listen to
Oh,
that
I have this. I have this
soundtrack.
on vinyl.
Oh,
Actually,
really?
I was gonna bring like all my graduate stuff here, but I forgot about that. It's okay.
All your memorabilia there.
Yeah. Well, like my favorite scene is probably when Benjamin wants to like have more of a conversation before they just have sex. And and I mean, partially it's that like, oh, I kind of want to see where this goes, but just think that Mrs. Robinson is such an interesting character.
Yeah.
I kind of don't like at the end how she almost becomes a little bit of a caricature just because the way that that scene plays out at the end, it's so
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
chaotic.
Yeah.
It's so much
Yeah.
insanity. And like when Elaine is like looking at everyone around her and they're just like mouthing words
Yeah.
really quickly, but you don't really know what they're saying.
Yeah.
I feel like that not like diminishes her character a little bit, but definitely is like, oh, that's a little bit of a different Mrs. Robinson than we've seen the whole movie,
Yeah.
especially because that scene where you find out more about her history, like really makes her look more like a person. And you're like, oh, I want to know more about Mrs. Robinson. At least like that's the way I think about that scene. And I just think she's such an interesting character. When Benjamin is like, well, what kind of car was it? That's probably like the funniest part in my
Oh,
opinion, just
yeah.
because of how I can't tell if it
It was
like
a
was
Ford, right?
sort
And
of
he's
a
like laughing
break.
about it.
Yeah, like a Ford. But there's like a moment where Mrs. Robinson like smiles a little bit, and I can't tell if that's like part of the scene or if that was Anne Bancroft like just kind of laughing at Dustin Hoffman in the scene. And I really like that moment because it
Yeah.
like it makes them look like they have a little bit more of a connection and just so interesting. I don't
Yeah.
know how else to put it. It's just like
Well,
with the art,
no, I
with
certainly
the
think that she did find him amusing. Like, I think
Mhm.
that was part of his appeal. Like, as we said, with everything in the hotel, like the way he's acting, like I think
Mhm.
some people would be like, this is weird or this is awkward, right? But she just like is sort of enjoying
Mhm.
his innocence at the same time. So
I think she wants to like I think she would like to have conversations with him, but then also she's just not allowing herself to. She's like that
yeah,
we're not gonna let it get there. This is just a fling for her
yeah,
and her having something good in her life because like clearly she's kind of miserable and just like going through the motions of
yeah,
things.
yeah. Well, I think she was afraid, right? I think at the same time because she had never had any real intimacy. I think she was also afraid of it. So, she's afraid of being hurt or rejected or getting too worked up in this. And she just wanted the pure escape with him and let it go with that. Right. Um, so you can't help but wonder after he leave, he breaks it off basically and then wants Elaine. You don't see like you see her that coming in from the rain and everything. Like
Mhm.
she says goodbye, Benjamin, and of course another great shot where it zooms out and you see how much distance
She's
there
like
is
in the
between them.
corner. She looks like
Yeah,
miserable. She literally looks like a wet dog that was
yeah,
lost for like a couple of weeks and just got home. She's just
yeah,
like in the corner like this. And you're like,
yeah,
oh, and it's so honestly, it's like so unappealing. Like that is like a moment where I mean, I don't think Anne Bancroft ever looks like ugly in this movie. She's gorgeous, but like
okay,
that's the scene where she's like kind of her ugliest, which is obviously like representing like she was going to tell Elaine this just to sort of spite this situation. And then obviously later you find out that she told Elaine that he raped her. The Graduate as a whole, I mean, especially with what I said about, I think the main premise ultimately is about Benjamin in this like transitional time. Um, and the whole thing with him wanting to make his own future. And that's always going to be relevant.
yeah,
So
no,
I just
absolutely.
think that that is always going to resonate with people. And then on top of that, you just have this like interesting, strange affair that also happens within the story.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. No, it's such a great film, which I watch, at least every year or so, because it's remarkable and it's on every level is a, classic masterpiece.
Mhm.
Well, Bailee, thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate that you took the time to share your love and enthusiasm and your takes on this film. So
Mhm.
thanks so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Where's the best place for people to follow you on social media? And I know your YouTube channel as well.
Yeah, probably, I mean, like the main hub is my YouTube channel, which is just my name, Bailee Walsh. Um, but I also have like an Instagram that I'm trying to be more active on. Sometimes I will just go like 2 months without posting anything, but I do post on my stories, if I don't have anything like in my feed. But I have an Instagram and oh, I have like a letterbox, obviously, letterbox and Goodreads,
Cool.
for like movies and books.
Great.
Yeah, I also have a Twitter, but it's like a lot of K-pop stuff, so I totally understand people not wanting to
If you're a
follow that.
K-pop fan as well, follow Bailee on Twitter. Okay, great. Well, I'll leave your YouTube channel and your social media links in the description box below. For
Mhm.
anyone, highly recommend checking Bailee's YouTube channel out. It's really, really great. So, Bailee, thanks again, and let's do it again sometime.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone, for watching and or listening. If you are currently listening to this on the audio version of the podcast and you've run out of episodes to listen to, head over to the YouTube channel where every single episode that I've ever created can be found, youtube.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies. I also want to thank all of my members on Patreon. If you're interested in becoming a member of my Patreon, head over to patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies for full details. And lastly, if this is your first time here, please consider subscribing to my channel by pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the movies logo. You will see it floating above my head in the top left corner to your top left in just a second. Just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new episodes or when I go live. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you in the next episode.